Okay, hi everyone, and welcome to week 11. Nearly done with your communications course. I hope you've enjoyed it so far. Now we're getting to the pointy end, and it's time to learn the final elements of your ability or your skills in communication in order to complete your final assessment. So today we will be looking at reflection, self-reflection, and feedback. So let's have a look at this. Again, remember, please refer all your questions to your amazing lecturers. So last week we covered Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. Very briefly, might I add, we sort of really just touched the tip of the iceberg, but it's important for you to become aware of the issues and the history. The history is really what will inform you in regards to how to communicate and how to have good, successful therapeutic client community service worker relationships with AXA groups. Week 11, self-reflective practice, self-awareness and personal communication skills, which will include feedback. So, just before we go on, this is one of those subjects or little topics that I find that students' kind of eyes just glaze over when I start talking about it, because I think that as a young practitioner or as a beginning practitioner, you don't really get a good sense of how important this is in your work. You're hoping maybe that people will give you feedback and then you just do what people tell you to do. Now, and certainly that is one component of what it takes to be a good community services worker. But also, and equally as important, is your ability to feedback to yourself and to learn through self-reflective practice. I think it's one of the skills that you need to learn, and that is a little more difficult to acquire if it's not something you generally do, if you're not a reflective person. And everybody has different ways and different learning styles. So if you are reflective, lucky you, this will be easy. If you're not, if you generally tend to need concrete examples or tend to need people to reflect for you, then this is a skill you need to develop. So becoming a reflective practitioner, as part of your course, you will be confronted with many new learning experiences, both when you're in the classroom and when you actually meet clients in placement. And so obviously becoming a reflective practitioner means that you can look at yourself and look at what you've done or are doing and be able to kind of get a sense of, are you going in the way that you had intended? Are there things that you could be doing better? Are there things that you're, pleased about the way that they're going? And that creates its own learning journey, aside from what other people tell you. So the first way, I guess, the first, door into self-reflection is through self-evaluation. Not an easy thing to do. We are always, compromised by our own biases. Hey, I'm doing the right thing. Look, I just did that there and I just did that over there. I'm pretty good. Confirmation bias is with us at all times. So self-evaluation takes an extra special effort to really dig deep and say, is what I'm seeing that I'm doing, is that really the best I can be, or do I have more to learn? Or I guess just being self-aware too in self-evaluation, that we tend to as humans go for that confirmation bias of yourself doing the right thing. So just be self-aware. Community service professionals deal with complex human problems, ethical issues, competing interests and values on a daily basis. And in order to master our roles, it is important to be able to critically evaluate how we perform so that we can identify areas that may require growth and change. So really that's what self-evaluation is. It's being able to say, well, I'm pretty good at that, but that other thing, I need to work on that. And there is actually no way of you being able to be aware of that unless you self-evaluate. There's just no way. You might hear other people talk, but they may not tell you the truth, or they may, not have noticed certain things. The only way for you to be able to recognize your areas for growth is for you to self-evaluate. And that little picture there is just the epitome of, bias that our minds do to us. We look at ourselves and we go, I'm a winner. I'm doing everything right. But believe me, there is room for improvement. Nobody gets it right 100% of the time. And so self-evaluation, what were my goals? What did I achieve? How do they compare? And then how does that, contrast with self-reflection? So self-reflection is a form of self-evaluation, but it involves asking yourself questions about how you work and deal with issues. It considers your strengths as well as your weaknesses and areas that need improvement. And it allows us to increase our skills, improve our knowledge, and develop our competencies. So yes, you can self-evaluate. No, I didn't achieve that. Yet these were my goals. Well, that's a self-evaluation, but it's not much. You don't think about it. That's what we're saying. So thinking about and trying to, kind of work out and discover more about yourself through self-evaluation and self-reflection is what we're talking about. And that's what leads you to discover your strengths and weaknesses. And that's what then can lead you to, making major improvements. So there on the right, being a reflective practitioner means that you make a commitment to personal awareness of your automatic reactions and prejudices by taking time to record and think back on them. Now here are some words that we haven't really touched on before, these automatic reactions and prejudices. So we know that humans act, without thinking. In a way, we are very, or most often, not aware of the way that our kind of reactions were processed within us. We just have that reaction. This is what I do. This is what I say. Okay? And so what we're saying is that having some personal awareness about these automatic reactions and taking the time to notice what they are can lead to a lot of information about yourself. You'll learn later on in different subjects, such as one that I do, which is supervision and debriefing, and also ethics and professional practice, where we learn a lot about prejudices and a lot about our automatic reactions, which are based on kind of our nature and things that just out of our consciousness, in the unconscious. So self-reflection gives you insight. And when you have insight, then you have more self-awareness, okay? And this is what we're looking for. So reflection occurs when individuals examine their attitudes and reactions to an interactive experience. So I once had I do supervision with students, and I once had a student who said to me that she found it difficult to go up to certain residents. She was working in aged care and she was doing her placement there, certain residents, and particularly one, and she didn't feel comfortable going up to this resident, and we sort of explored that through supervision, which we'll get onto later. And she said, I think she doesn't like me because of my colour. Okay, and I think that she doesn't like me because of my colour because once I went up to her and she said something, and I don't know what it was that she said. And so, we examined that, because you can't change other people, but you can certainly change the way you respond. So her response to this person was, I'm not going to go up to you. But actually, she was depriving this client or this resident, say, of, resources and assistance. So we examined this automatic reaction, and, it got to a feeling that, this person was prejudiced against her, so, racially discriminating. And then we kind of talked about what that was for her and why that would be true, because she didn't seem to feel it about other people. And we got to this moment in time where her auntie had said to her, watch out, because this particular race doesn't like us, right? So someone has said something to her. And she wasn't even conscious that she was carrying that with her. And yet, there it was, in her automatic reaction. And once we did this self-reflection and we did this talking and she journaled on it, she was able to say to me, it's because of what my auntie told me. I have taken that to heart and now I'm applying it, I'm projecting it onto people, whereas it may not even be true. So that's how she worked through it. So this is how self-reflection works. And in every job, in community services that you have, because it's such an interactive, it's such an interactive thing, having to speak to people and be with people and so on, these feelings may come up, and quite often do. Different feelings come up. And self-reflection helps to get to kind of the bottom of it in a way. And you can either do that on your own or you can do that with your supervisor. And it says there, which I really like, self-reflection is a humbling process. It's essential to find out why you think, say, and do certain things, and then better yourself. And with this particular student, she did. She just kind of got past her own beliefs, that this woman didn't like her, and in fact, it turned out to be fine. So, what are the theoretical underpinnings behind self-reflection? Dewey, this is old, 1910, wrote that reflective practice refers to the active, persistent and careful consideration of any belief or supposed form of knowledge in the light of the grounds that support it. So the active, persistent and careful consideration of any belief or supposed form of knowledge in the light of the grounds that support it. So that's what we did. We looked at this active and persistent, belief that she had about this woman, and we applied careful consideration to it, and we found the grounds that support it, which was her aunt having transmitted that belief to her. And so this means that you will have a questioning approach. You will consider why things are the way they are and how they might be. And what you do and how you behave should be carefully planned, informed by theory and experience, and must be purposeful. And look, when you do go out and have supervision, when you are in your workplace and have supervision, either if it's a placement or whether you have full-time work, you'll be required to have been self-reflective. So it's not just that we're suggesting self-reflection. No, it is a requirement of supervision that you come to the supervision with journals, with ideas about, what's happening and why. So it's a skill that isn't just a suggestion, it's mandated. You have to learn how to be questioning about yourself. Sean from 1983 regards reflection as having two aspects: self-reflection in action and reflection on action. So that relates to action research. When you reflect in action, your quick thinking and reactions that occur as you are doing. So in that moment, you're reflecting, oh, should have done that. Oh, I'll do that now, right? So it's in the moment. Reflection on action is that stuff that happens afterwards, kind of the stuff that I was talking about with this particular student and the resident at the aged care. It's considering the situation after the fact, and I find that this to be the most true of, real life and workplace participation. You do reflect instantly. Oh, I should have done that. I'll go and do that now. That's that quick reflection. But then, at the end of the day, when you're writing a journal piece, you notice things, and that's when you then go the next day and base a new behavior or a new thought or a new way of doing things on that reflection, and that becomes that nice action sort of reflection cycle. Current accepted features. There are 5 key features of reflection that are widely accepted. So this is more around the theory. Reflection results in learning, and through changing ideas and your understanding of the situation is how the learning occurs. So you reflect, you learn, and you apply. Reflection is an active process of learning and is more than thinking or thoughtful action, and that's really good. So it's really good to remember that it's not just about, oh yeah, I should have done that. It's, I should have done that. This is what I'm going to do next time. Do it, then reflect back on it. So we're creating that action reflection cycle. Reflection involves problematizing our roles by recognizing that practice is not without dilemmas and issues. And this is difficult for people just coming into community services work, because everything is a problem. So you can't distinguish kind of what's right, what's wrong. But as you become more experienced, problematizing means you evaluate a particular action or a particular process critically. Is that the best way that I could be doing that? So where there was no problem, you now pick it up and you look at it and you say, is that the best way I can be doing it? And apply all your critical thinking skills to it. Is there another way? What do other people say? How do I compare? Etc., etc. So problematizing becomes a good sort of way of creating topics for reflection in the future. I guess moving forward, initially everything's going to be difficult and weird, but as you get more experience, problematizing becomes a really good way of doing it. Reflection is not a linear process, but a cyclical one where reflection leads to the development of new ideas, which are then used to plan the next stage of learning. So this is that cycle I'm talking about, that cycle of learn, reflect, that process. Reflection encourages looking at issues from different perspectives, which helps you to understand the issue and scrutinize your own values, assumptions, and perspective. So again, that this is another technique. So we're not problematizing, but we are looking at this process that you do from the perspective of a client, from the perspective of an outsider, a family member, another worker, right? So different perspectives create, opportunities for learning. So what are the tools involved? What are the tools for learning? Self-reflection can be incorporated into daily practice simply by asking ourselves questions such as, why did I make that decision? Could I have improved the outcome? Did I respond to the client appropriately? And you can do that in action, can't you? You can do that day to day at any time. You don't have to write about it. And you can actually create new opportunities based on just asking those questions. And then there's also physical things that you can do, like take notes, record keeping, journaling, or video and audio recordings. So this is really just a way for you to get down on paper what's going on. Now I know, because I've been a counsellor a long time, people are not into that. They don't enjoy, kind of journaling and writing things out and reflecting back and sort of using that writing as a way sometimes of kind of getting through the difficulties that they're having. Okay, so I am really aware of it. But what I'm saying is that even if you don't do that on a personal level or on a personal, note, you need to learn to do it for your job. That self-reflective practice will guaranteed give you insight and help you to work better. So any small problem that you're having with anyone, with anything, you grab a book, you make it private, it's just your own, you keep it at home, whatever, and you write about it to yourself. Let's have a look at supervision in action. So supervision is one of the ways in which in the workplace you will be able to not just reflect, but also get feedback, about your reflections or about sort of issues that you've highlighted and reflected upon. So as I explained to you, you've got to come into supervision already with things in mind about which you want to reflect and about, sort of things that you want to talk about. So this is quite long, but I'll play it a little bit of it. Just to give you an idea of what it might sound like if you haven't ever done supervision before.
Excuse me, what would you like for your dinner? It's
chicken, associated potatoes and green beans.
This film is about how staff skills are enhanced through supervision in care homes for older people, with two charitable providers, Jewish Care in London and CLS in Wigan. At Jewish Care, Kafilat is a daytime team leader and supervisor, and Tracy is one of the residential care workers she supervises.
Overall, how do you feel about working here?
Oh, I like working here. I've liked it since I've been here for nearly 6 years now, and I do like it. It's like my second home in a way.
Supervision is an incredibly important issue for Jewish Care. I believe it's the backbone of any organisation, and therefore if you get supervision right and embedded in an organisation, I think myself and colleagues at a senior level realise that it is the vehicle with which one can drive through the values that the organisation has.
So you want tin salmon?
Beans and small lettuce and tomato.
Jewish care homes for older people pride themselves on having strong values such as warmth, kindness, dignity and respect. Supervision is seen as a good opportunity to remind staff of these and ensure a high quality of care which benefits those who use the service.
I've had to challenge people in supervision in terms of how they at times have spoken to a resident. The staff may feel stressed out, maybe there's a lot going on in the home, they're trying to get a job done, somebody may ask them a question or a resident may need assistance, and it may be their tone of voice or how they address that person, they're not showing respect, and it has to be addressed, and that will be addressed either informally or formally in supervision.
In regards to your communication with the service users, do you think you have any problems?
Not really. Sometimes I might be a bit loud, but then because sometimes like if they're hard of hearing you have to raise your voice a bit, but sometimes you forget. So sometimes I might be a bit loud, and then you have to realise and then just come down a bit. You don't have sugar, do you?
One of the most sensitive aspects of caring for older people is end-of-life support. At Jewish Care, supervision is used to help develop staff's ability to cope with this more effectively.
I know it's a very, very sensitive issue that most people don't want to discuss. The service users don't want to discuss it. The staff are finding it very awkward to discuss it. So I always use a supervision session to be able to know exactly how the staff feel in regards to that. Around last month and December, we lost like 3 residents. And I want to know how you feel about it and what impact that's had on you.
It's good that we can have somebody to talk to, like we can come to you or Paul, or we can go to somebody at Jewish Care. And, we also have to be there for like the relatives and, help each other. We all have to like bond and help That's why it's good that we're like one big family, you know, we all look after each other.
I think the difficult thing is that staff feel that they have to continue doing their job, and they have to be strong in a sense, but you know, everybody's an individual and people in a sense grieve differently, and the staff grieve for residents who have passed away. And I think it's important that they get the opportunity to express how they're feeling and their emotions are dealt with, because I feel like if they do not express how they're feeling and their emotions are not dealt with at that time, then it will be built up inside them, and then they will get more stressful, and in the end they won't be able to relax and do the job they need to do on the floor, and how they relate with other people, and especially the residents.
So there you go, a little bit from that video, but I think that was the main kind of information I wanted you to look at, and that is why people go to supervision, why have supervision. You know, it's about not just improving, but also in debriefing and talking about feelings. Clearly for this person, and for many people working in community services, loss, bereavement, grief, you know, disappointments, all of those elements, you know, everybody will encounter those at some time, and having that dedicated supervisor for you to debrief with is really important. So that's one aspect of supervision. But the other aspect is to be able to try to improve, and we saw, you know, in that case, you know, between the worker and the supervisor, how do you think you're communicating? I think I'm a little bit loud because some of them are hard of hearing and so forth. So just an opportunity to reflect. When I do supervision, I expect that the students will have thought about themselves, are going to bring things, you know, into the conversation that we can then kind of work out and sort of try and flesh out. So professional supervision may be completed internally or externally, will be driven by the supervisee's needs and occurs within the context of a sustained confidential relationship, and should be experienced as supportive but also challenging. So it's important for your supervisor to ask you questions. You know, is this how you intend to go on? You know, are there any other ways that you could have responded, etc. And it allows a person to person to receive, I think there's a person to person, to receive feedback in a safe environment, examine and try out skills. So it allows the people in a person-to-person way to receive feedback. So it may be carried out individually or in groups. So they're the construct or the framework of how supervision is done. But it may also be that you get to be in reflecting teams, and reflecting teams can be an important means of discovering new ideas and options. So in these teams, an issue is brought, you know, sort of to the fore. I'm having a problem with a resident. The resident is doing A, B, C, and D. I have tried this. What does everybody else think? And sort of it's like a round table group session, if you like, but it's more about reflecting on the scenario. It was developed within the field of counselling to give clients the opportunity to listen and to reflect on the observations of a team of counsellors. So different counsellors reflect and discuss the session with the client. Deliberations are respectful and positive. So in this case, it's not a client, it's actually the person who has the issue. So the community service worker, you know, gets others to reflect and comment on the problem. And, you know, they might say things like, I noticed that, or, you know, I wonder if, I was struck by, perhaps it is. You know, they're just some openers. But it's really mainly about other people contributing, you know, and trying to help you resolve that problem. Now we come to the topic of feedback. So within supervision there is feedback. Within self-reflection there is no feedback. You give yourself your own feedback, or you kind of try and work it out for yourself. Generally feedback comes from an outside source, a supervisor, a manager, a colleague, anybody really, a client, might give you, feedback. And feedback is really, really important, both to be able to receive and also to give. So it's important for us to be able to accept feedback and give it in a constructive way, we say here. And the first dot point there, peer evaluation and feedback is most helpful when team members are supportive of each other. And colleagues must feel comfortable and trust each other in order to provide honest and constructive feedback. And so that's what we're asking you to do with your assessment 4. You're going to get into pairs with somebody, whether they be a student or they be someone that you're living with, in which you role play out a scenario, and then they're going to give you feedback about how you went. And it's a difficult task to receive feedback, but it's actually also really hard to give, unless you know what you're looking for. So, maybe if you are going to get together with someone who doesn't do this course, just to brief them on what they should be looking for, all the different elements of all the micro skills of communications. That's just in regards to your assessment. So giving feedback to others is a key life skill, and community service professionals will have many opportunities to give and receive feedback during their careers. Notice that sandwich, there's a reason for it. Okay, a feedback sandwich is something that you might learn about in your tutorial further, but just to briefly outline it, it is really about being able to construct feedback in a way that it's going to be received the way it was intended. So if you think about having to tell someone something negative and you just blurt it right out, or it's been blurted right out to you because of because of the way we are, our brains, we don't like that. That feels confronting. It might feel like a stressor. And so what we might do is react. How dare you say that to me, right? Like you fight, or you run away, or you freeze, or whatever you do, fight, flight, or freeze response. So what we do in community service is we develop ways of giving feedback that include the constructive criticism, but which is sandwiched in a couple of, positive things, right? And maybe not all positive, but also encouraging. So you start with a positive. I think you've been dealing, really well with your new role that you've just come into at, the aged care service. And you would have noticed that there are opportunities there for you to communicate a little bit more with the client. So that's the corrective stuff. But I know and I can see that you're really trying. And I look forward to seeing how you go with that. Right? And so the encourager, positive, the meat in the middle, and then on top, making the sandwich. And so giving and receiving feedback, who does it? Well, lots of people, colleagues, students, managers and supervisors, patients / clients / residents, carers and their families. Families are big on giving feedback. Stakeholders, consultants, funding bodies, and also support staff. So these are people you will be required to give feedback to and receive feedback from within community services, and that list is not exhaustive. Feedback should create a strong and healthy relationship with the receiver, and in some cases the intention will be to help the receiver of the feedback to achieve their goals. So let's go back to my example of my new person who has started with me, and I've just said to her, look, well done on getting the role. You're going to need to improve, or you're going to be developing, new communication strategies. So I've given the corrective there. Because if this person does manage to, improve their communication skills with the new residents, then those residents will give good feedback. And that, will mean that that person, gets accepted into, the facility readily and is able to stay beyond probation, for example. So the goal might be to to be given the full-time job. And part of it that I've identified with this particular new person is that they're going to have to communicate a bit more. But I haven't just said that. I've put it in my feedback sandwich because the goal is for them to get the full-time job. So that might be a reason for doing feedback, to achieve goals. So the purpose of feedback might include affirming and encouraging another person, correcting the skill to be learned, confronting someone about their behaviour. That has happened to me a few times with my student placements. How do you talk to someone about correcting their behaviour, a behaviour which I personally think is so obviously wrong? But when you bring that attitude into, giving feedback, can't believe you did that. That's really confronting. It could also be humiliating and embarrassing. So that feedback sandwich, that's one way of making it more palatable and making it a bit easier to deliver that really confronting feedback. And also reducing discrepancies between attitudes, understandings, and performance and goals. Because, you know what, as we know, there can be many communication misunderstandings, many communication barriers, even between best of friends. We know that. And they're more heightened and more likely in a work environment where we don't know each other very well, where, we might feel a bit shy to communicate and so forth. And so maybe you've interpreted something, but it's wrong. And somebody has to give you feedback to let you know. So we use feedback, in that encouraging way. The dimensions of feedback, according to DeVito, are 5 dimensions. So there's positive to negative. You're doing that really, really well. You're not doing that well so much. Immediate or delayed. I need you to change this right now. Compared to over the course of the next few months, you need to do this. Supportive and critical. I can see what you're trying to do, compared to that's really wrong, don't do it, right? Person focus, message focus, you are the problem, compared to, the way that this is coming across is the problem. Low monitoring to high monitoring. Obviously, I'm going to watch you every day, compared to we'll have another review in 6 months. So they're the different dimensions. Effective feedback. What makes effective feedback? According to Higgs, it is sufficient, specific, timely, regular, it is encouraging, it is relevant, reciprocal, it is not unexpected. When you are given unexpected, corrective feedback, the problem is with the person giving it, because they should have alluded to, in some way, kind of built up this understanding in you that this needed to be remedied. And also, not just that, you should also be self-reflective. And therefore, you would expect to be told about that, or, for some discussion to come up. Inclusive of recommendations for improvement, so there should already be suggestions as to how this can be remedied. Provided when the events or behaviours being discussed are fresh in the giver and receiver's minds, so that's the timeliness of it. That's the best feedback. It's when it's given kind of right away. And related to behaviours that can be changed, not changes. Focused on specific problems rather than generalisations. So we're really honing in on the issue, not just in general, your communication is no good. Specifically with this particular client, I would like you to do this. I would like you to do X. And we focus on decisions and actions rather than assumed intentions. So things are written down so there can be no confusion. And it's also based on first-hand experience and objective data rather than second-hand reports and subjective information. So that means that, the person who gives you the feedback was actually involved. So, general rules. I have already been through this, but be specific and focus on behaviour, not the personality. So that's always the behaviour, your behaviour, and you wouldn't really ever talk about it like that. And if you did, it would be a very serious matter. You would go about it in a way that was kind of really contextual when you were delivering that information. We would be constructive and aim at helping the colleague improve their performance. Use I statements rather than you statements. You don't do this and you never do that. I believe that Mrs. So-and-so would like it if you would go up to her, right? So timeliness is also important, and we stick to 2 or 3 key issues. Broad stroke feedback is never useful because it's just not specific. I can't generally improve. I need to improve specifically related to certain issues. We don't, therefore, do sweeping statements and sweeping criticisms. We're always respectful and supportive, and we allow for 2-way communication because, maybe I've got some corrective feedback that if I understood a bit better in the context, I might change my opinion of the feedback. So it's got to be 2-way. So constructive criticism is an important ingredient for personal and professional development and for strengthening relationships. So how do we prepare for feedback? So before giving feedback, we may need to plan for its delivery, and we can use the STAR model. So the STAR model is used in communication, and it can be used, when you've got to either give an answer or you've got to give a definition. Because you don't want to be broad, you want to be specific. And the STAR model gives you a really good step-by-step approach to becoming specific. So how do you do it? You look at the situation. You don't just say, well, in general, communication's not that good. You say, with Mrs. Jones, on Thursday, I noticed that Mrs. Jones seemed unhappy about the way that she had been spoken to, for example. And the task, what is expected in relation to work, behavioural tasks or skills? Again, not communication in general, kind of out there, specific to Mrs. Jones. Mrs. Jones is a very sensitive person, and we generally tend to take that into account. She's quite emotional, so when we talk to her, we always use a very soft voice and a very low tone, for example. And how did you meet or fall short of the expectations? Well, I noticed that you had raised your voice to her, and the result and the impact would be, and so she was a little bit distressed. So remember, some people find it very difficult to give honest feedback, and there's a range of reasons for this, including cultural norms and values, power differences, and the fear of conflict. Again and again, self-reflect. Be aware of yourself. Know yourself. Evaluate yourself. Am I the sort of person who doesn't like confrontation? Would I find it really difficult to give, constructive feedback or correctional feedback? Do I find it hard to hear that? Am I the sort of person who's very sensitive? What's going on there? In my culture, is that done? And if not, how am I going to learn to do it and accept it and so forth? So the key here is to self-evaluate and be very self-aware of where you are in all of this. Where are your biases? Where are your barriers? Where are you in the sandwich, if you like, or the cycle? Where are you? Where do you stand? Because your ability to prepare feedback will be influenced by your own personality, and you kind of have to learn the skill. You have to learn the skill, and the STAR, I like the STAR model, and it's good when you write it down because you get very specific. Well, that's giving feedback. What about receiving feedback? So asking for feedback is one of the best ways to feel in control of your work and accurately be able to judge your performance in the role. However, many people are uncomfortable receiving feedback. Is that you? Have a think. One strategy to become more comfortable with feedback is to actively seek it out from colleagues whose work you respect. And you can ask for feedback from people anytime. So the more you're asking for feedback, the better that you're going to come across. And that might be a revelation to some people. They might not realise that. But people actually like, to be asked for feedback, because then, we've got two people kind of working towards the same goal. I want to be better. I'm asking for feedback. And this person wants me to be better because they want me to achieve my goals and achieve maybe their goals as well. So let the other person know that you would like feedback so that they can have time to prepare it. I would like feedback on my work. If that's okay, when can we meet? So they might go ahead and do, the STAR model. Ask them about what you want feedback. So what is it that you would like feedback about? Be specific about that. That's point number 2. And ask open questions about your work. What is your opinion on the way I handled client X? So we're just looking for a broad opinion. How would you approach this if you were me? I think they're great questions. And they're open questions. There's lots of information that could be given there when receiving feedback. And so we need to be aware that these 3 processes will come into action. We will react. And during this stage of feedback, you have your reaction. Oh, I wasn't expecting to hear that, or maybe I was. Let's assume the negative. We need to be aware of and manage our emotional reaction then to what we are hearing. If it's something negative, you've got to be aware that it might have hurt your feelings. Emotional intelligence is what we're looking for here. We're looking to go, well, it's not personal. It's about my work. It doesn't diminish me as a person. It means I have some skills that I need to learn. That reaction needs to be dealt with, processed. So think about what we say and do now will seem to us, what we say and do now will seem to us and others later on. So don't overreact if you can possibly help it. How's that going to look on you? Probably not. You should concentrate on listening to the feedback and ask questions to ensure that you understand the other person's views and expectations. That seems obvious, and this is a communication skills course, so you should know how to do that. Check in, summarize and check in. So what you're saying is, and then fill in the blanks. Is that right? Did I get that right? There we go. And don't skip to this stage. In other words, don't skip to the next stage, which is to reflect. You've got to have your reaction, so make sure you process. Depending on what the feedback is, we might need to end the discussion at this point to give ourselves time to think properly about what we have heard. So if it is actually something that feels very personal, and maybe it was not delivered in a very good way, you need to just take a moment, and so you should. Then the second stage is to reflect. We need to be honest with ourselves about our performance and open-minded about what the person has said. We need to allow ourselves extra time for the emotions to calm down if necessary and ask for specific examples in order to understand the feedback. So what would you have preferred me to do, and how could I do it differently next time? Are really good open questions. And finally, we respond. And at this stage, we've accepted that feedback, and we have to thank the person for giving it. Okay, and if we disagree, then we respectfully say so, because remember, feedback is that two-way channel. And when we don't do it defensively. How dare you say that about me? We do it with facts. Okay, I hear what you've said. The facts are A, B, and C. Or from my perspective, this is how I saw it. And so that person can have a better understanding, and just in exactly the same way that all feedback should go, it should be about reflection and then action or learning, right? So too the process between yourself and a person who's giving you feedback. And then we respectfully negotiate and agree to next steps to address the issue raised. And then ensure that we understand the next steps and are committed to be able to implement what we have to do. So really, it's about, this three-way response, or this three-stage response is about taking one step at a time, but ultimately leading to accepting the feedback because you have to, because it's, your supervisor and they have an expectation of you, but being able to do it in a way that you recognize it's part of learning. There are no mistakes, there's just opportunities for learning. And we've talked about how we respond then. We respond in a non-defensive way. So how can we do this? We listen to what is said without frequently interrupting. So none of the, hang on a minute, oh, but no, don't say that, just hold it in, wait to the end, make notes if you have to. Be responsive and willing to hear what is being said. Accept the feedback without denial. And, you may be thinking to yourself, yeah, but, what if I don't respect the person who's giving me the feedback? And that may well be the case. They may be a manager that you don't respect, and in other words, they might say things about you or make judgments and criticisms that are not validated, when you review the case or the situation. They're invalid. And remember this, is that you need to build the skill of being able to respond, speak, advocate for yourself. Learn that it's okay to have a reply. Remember I said to you that you might have biases, that you might have cultural values that don't allow you to do that. Well, in feedback you need to be able to do that respectfully. Ask for clarifications and examples if needed. You can do that in a response, and understand and remember the point of feedback, which is to help you to attain your goals, and think about how you can apply it. Of course, listening is important. It's fundamental. When we use our active listening skills when communicating with each other around feedback, we are listening. Listening skills have a big impact on feedback discussions. Active listening helps us to understand what the other person is saying and know when the other person has understood what we are saying and achieve mutual understanding. So active listening, we listen and we respond and check in and make sure that we've understood what has been said. But we're not just listening for words, we're also watching. We're also taking into account what this person is also doing as they're speaking. So observational listening skills attune us to body language, facial expressions, and tone of voice. And that is it. So please remember that all of these skills will be assessed in your final assessment 4, listening. How do you respond to feedback? What is your ability to reflect on yourself in feedback? And you'll need to be able to write that up in a final response. So that was week 11. I hope you enjoyed it. I know it is, for some people, feedback is not easy to take. It's not easy to give. And also self-reflection is something that you really need to work towards. But it is it's fundamental in this line of business, in this sector, for your growth, but also for the betterment of clients that you're working with. Okay, I'll see you next time.